Joining me. This is going to be awesome. Mostly if you pay attention, mostly if you take notes, but in general, it's going to be pretty good stuff here. So without further ado, let's jump right in and talk about the hidden art of objection flipping. So first of all, what do I mean by objection flipping? Well, it's a way of thinking about how you show up as a professional, what you do, what you say, what kind of content you share, and all of the other things that you do prior to even getting in a sales conversation with someone. And so let me say first that one of the biggest problems that especially rookies make is you don't think about selling an enrollment until you book the selling an enrollment call with someone. And this is, well, among other things, it's part of the reason that your closing rates are so bad. If you haven't earned somebody's trust prior to getting on the call with them, you're starting on the back foot. You're starting from a bad position. And so in other videos and other trainings, you probably heard me talking about what I call opening instead of closing. This is a philosophy that I started creating probably about 10 years ago, because I hate being on a sales call with somebody who is trying to compress the whole know, like, and trust process into one call. It feels disingenuous, it feels forced, it feels fake, and it feels manipulative. And you know what I'm talking about. If you're in this space, if you've been in this space for any amount of time, you know what I'm talking about. You will have been on calls with people who you don't feel real respect. You don't feel really listened to. You feel like they're just trying to checkmate you into saying yes because they've cleverly and artfully managed to take away any objections you might have. Well, that's the aggressive way. That's the hard way. That's the way where the salesperson becomes dinner table conversation for the prospect. And what I mean by that is the prospect sits down to dinner, you know, husband or wife says, "How was your day?" And the first thing they talk about was this awful experience they had with a salesperson. I mean, I don't know how to, like if that isn't enough for you, if you can't relate to that, then this training probably isn't for you. But if you can relate to it, here's what I want you to understand. I want you to understand that, especially in the coaching space, especially today, we have what I would say is a trust recession. I think that's a clever way of saying trust is at an all-time low, skepticism is at an all-time high, and your competition keep making the same mistakes. So that's good for you because there's room for you to zig while they're zagging and sort of, mop up, really. But you've got to know what you're doing. And so the first thing you have to know to master objection flipping is, what are the objections that you come across routinely when it comes to your sales calls? And I can give you a hint here. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. It doesn't matter about any of that stuff. And it doesn't matter about the specifics, really. So really pay attention to this part. Basically, there are only 3 real objections. But of those 3 real objections, 2 of them are actually the same. So check this out. The first thing you have to know is that all objections stem from time, money, or trust. So here's what I mean by time. The person is not sure if they can dedicate the time to the thing. And this is obviously more for people who sell services and information and like we do, and coaching, right? They're going to say, "I'm not sure if I have the time." And now that I'm thinking about it, really everything comes down to trust. And I'm just having this aha moment as I'm saying this to you guys. But the time objection is a trust objection, right? They don't trust that they'll be able to commit the time to it, means they don't trust that it'll work. So then there's the money objection. The examples that are commonly used are, and misunderstood and sort of used recklessly, are if somebody's arm was cut off and it was $10,000 to have it reattached, they'd find the money. You've heard some version of that before, I'm sure. And it's like, that's a horrible way to look at a true thing, if that makes sense. And here's what I mean by that. Sometimes money really is the objection. Sometimes people can't afford it. And so rather than going into your whole thought process about selling with that sort of like macho, like 10x closer bro kind of attitude, like, fuck that. Because that leads to awkward and uncomfortable sales conversations. If you go in with that mentality, then you're going to be pushy. You're going to come across in ways that you don't have to come across and that people don't appreciate. And so instead of that, let's do a little bit of thinking ahead of time. Let's just use some strategy. And even if I could say so, some common sense, right? So I said time, money, and trust are the three objections. And really, it's all trust. So trust is really the only objection, but it's like, do they trust themselves? Do they trust you? Do they trust some part of the process? There's all these different things that you can either trust or not trust. And it's very difficult to ferret those out on a sales call, right? Because people will throw all kinds of distractions and deflections at you in terms of their excuses. And so I don't know about you, but if there's one thing I hate doing, it's getting on a sales call and dealing with a bunch of objections. I don't like it. And so my solution is, I guess, what I'm about to talk about, this objection flipping. And so the idea here is this: if the content that you have created that brings people to you in the first place has thought about how to overcome these objections, then you're on the right track. So let me see here. I'm going to try a quick line drawing for you guys that illustrates. You see, if this represented the entire sales process from, I guess, start to finish, this person here doesn't know you at all. And over here, they're happy to buy whatever it is you're selling. So most people think of the sales process as starting like here, right? They think of it as starting at the end. And what they're missing with that mentality is all of this time here, from the first time they find out about you till you get them on a sales call, should be used to strategically overcome objections. How? How do you overcome objections if they're not even being expressed? Well, you go back to knowing that really all objections come from time, money, or trust. And that beneath that, it's really all trust. So you start by knowing that. Here's where we get tactical. And this is where you want to pull the pen out. This is where you want to pause and rewind the video if this is the replay. And you want to really lock in on this, because this is, I mean, this can improve your percentages of calls to enrollments by 50%, by more than 50%. Like, this is crazy powerful. And yet, here's the funny part. You'll watch this video, but you won't do the work. And God help me, I don't know why. It's probably because you haven't paid me yet. You know, you haven't put any skin in the game yet. And so you're just going to listen to it. It's going to go in there, but you're not going to actually act on it. So whatever. I'm going to tell you anyway. I'm going to give it to you. It's right here, and it's free. So we talked about this, right? And how all of this time you could be strategically overcoming objections with your content. So let me give you an example of specifically how to do that. Take a piece of paper, draw a line down the center of the piece of paper, and on the left-hand side, write down every objection you've ever gotten, every objection you can think of. It doesn't matter what it is, just write it down. Let's say you are a fitness coach, and People always say to you, oh, I love you. I love what you do, but I just don't have time for that. I just don't have time to put in an hour a day, 5 days a week in the gym. Now, if you want it bad enough, you got time. We all know that, right? And so when they say they don't have time, you know that's not true. But what do? You see, what they're saying to you when they say they don't have time is it's not important enough for me to find the time. It's not important enough for me. I don't understand how the fitness that you're going to teach me how to have can benefit me and solve the problems I need solved. And I only have 24 hours in a day, and I have to be very strategic and careful with where I put my time. That's closer to what the objection really is, if they say they don't have time. And so you want to write out every single objection, whether it's time, money, trust, whatever it is. And now in old school selling, what they would teach you is they would teach you in the right-hand column, you come up with a way to address each of those objections, right? Well, there's a far better way, thanks to social media, thanks to content, thanks to the phenomenon of people following other people. There's a far better way to do it. And that is to share firsthand experiences in story form about how you dealt with these things in your own life and how you overcame them. And you want to go into detail about your process and your thinking. So let's say it was a time you're a fit pro and the objection you keep getting is one of, well, I can't spend 90 minutes in the gym 5 days a week, which of course, if your life depended on it, of course you could, right? If it was like, if you don't find 90 minutes a day to spend in the gym 5 days a week, we will come and take your children. You bet your ass you're spending 5, right? You're going to find the time. And so it's not that they don't have the time, it's they don't believe they'll get what they want from the thing. So the old school way to handle that objection is to ferret it out on the sales call and try to convince them. However, see, things like trust take time. And this is really key here. Really get this in. In fact, if you only got one thing from this video, this would be the thing I'd want you to get. We all misunderstand that you can go fast with things, but you need to go slow with people. All of this high ticket, one call close horse shit just pollutes our minds, okay? People don't want to buy on one touch point. Does that make sense? Are you guys getting this? And so we want to give people plenty of touch points along the way. And in those touch points, we want to be able to strategically address what we know their objections are going to be. So back to the Fit Pro example. Oh, you don't have time? Oh, okay, well, look, it's not a problem because I've got a program for you that only requires 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes in the evening. Now, can you carve out 2 15-minute blocks to help your health issues? Most people would say yes. That is a good version of the bad way of doing it. A good version of the good way of doing it is to share content from your own experience or experience of past clients that's in story form. It's not written in a heavy-handed way. It's not written with direct response, persuasive copy. It's just informative. And in that informative post or those informative posts, you talk about your client, Joe, who was 40 pounds overweight and couldn't make it up the stairs and everything. And then you gave him this 15 minutes twice a day routine and their results just blossomed. Now Joe's back to his, college, his fighting weight, his wrestling weight or whatever the expression is. He feels great. His wife is more attracted to him. Everything's better, right? But here's what you don't do. You don't write these pieces of content speaking to the person reading them, because we can argue with that. If I write something saying, if you do this, you'll get this, then you can say, well, I don't believe that. But if I'm telling you a story, then you can't disagree with a story. I mean, how do you know? You don't know what Joe did or didn't do, right? Now, you might say to yourself, oh, that wouldn't work for me. And that's where the explaining in firsthand context about the process and the results lowers the defenses for people. So it lowers their defenses because it's presented in a story, right? Think about trying to talk to a kid about something they don't want to hear, or something they did wrong. Like let's say you're having a punishment talk with your kid and you're saying, you did this and this is the results. What do you get from the kid? You get resistance. You get them shutting down. Well, adults are no different. We're just better at hiding it. We're better at sitting there on the call with you, nodding and saying yes. We're better at acting like everybody's on the same page. And then when you least expect it and you think you've really done a good job, we go, you know what? It sounds great, but I'm going to have to think about it. And you're dead in the water. Why are you dead in the water? Because you missed your opportunity to create the trust. Why did you miss your opportunity to create the trust? Because you've only given yourself this much time in which to do it. You missed out on all of this, right? And so here, it's a little like you wouldn't necessarily use as many stories here, but here it's all stories. And so you create stories from firsthand experience that directly speak to you dealing with the objections that your prospects have. To be clear, you have to write these in story form. They have to be first person. They have to be like, this is what happened to me. Here's where I found myself. Here were my doubts and my skepticism. Here's the choice I made, and here's the results I have. I hope you're getting that. In fact, let me say that again. And if you're watching the recording, stop, get your pen and paper, and be prepared to write this part down. When you share these story posts that address your experiences in first person with dealing with the objections that you know your clients are going to have, you sort of slide objection handling in underneath the radar. Like you slide it in without them feeling like they're on the defense and they have to sort of fight for their position and any of that. And the way you do it is this, and this is the part that you want to write down. You talk in first person about challenges you had, and these challenges obviously need to be about the objections that you're overcoming. Challenges you had, the problems you were facing because of these challenges, what you found that worked, and this is super important, your doubts, cynicism, and skepticism about that solution. And then I'm going to go here with this. And then once you've addressed your doubts, cynicism, and skepticism about the solution, you need to talk about your process of deciding to do it anyway, and then your results. So it's your problem, the pain it caused, the solution you found, your doubts about the solution, your process you went through to decide to do the solution, and the results you got. This is objection flipping. That's it right there. It happens way before you ever get on the call with somebody. It's part of building your personal brand. And when you tell it in ahead of the okay, so there's a couple of things here. One is when people digest your content, consume your content without sort of being in a sales call dynamic with you, there's no sales resistance, right? When you're just watching my content, there's no sales resistance. If I was on a call with you and I kept trying to hammer you with these stories to prove my point, you'd have sales resistance. So again, like, deal with the objections here. Deal with the objections before in your content, before you ever get to the sales call. Then you're going to have a lot less objections on the sales call. So let's just recap. I promised you I'd teach you how to objection flip. The main things to take away from this are that objection flipping needs to happen before you get into a sales call with somebody. So it's content that you create that is meant to nurture people prior to sales calls. You want to tell it in first person. It's first person stories where you talk about your struggles with the objections that you're helping your prospects to overcome. You don't address them directly. You speak first person. Okay. You talk about the problem you had. You talk about the problems it caused, right? Because you didn't have the solution. You talk about finding the solution. You talk about your internal fears and doubts and resistance. You talk about making the choice to lean in on it anyway, and you talk about the results. And you do this for every objection. So you make a piece of paper with a line across down the center, and on the left-hand column, you come up with every objection you can manage. And on the right-hand column, you flip it into a piece of first-person story content that talks about you dealing with that objection. This is the way. What's the little Yoda's name on the Star Wars show? Or was it Boba Fett? One of them, somebody said, this is the way, and it became super popular from one of those Star Wars shows. Well, this is the way. I guess I'm Boba Fett and Yoda. I'm Yoda Fett. Bitches. So objection flipping is dealing with it before it ever comes up. It's dealing with it before you ever get in the sales call, and it will dramatically lower sales resistance. Why? Because you've already talked about it. You've already addressed it. You've already shown that you're aware of it. You've already shown that you've struggled with it, and you've already shown that you know how to overcome it. What we do when we read stories is we automatically put ourselves in the shoes of the person having the experience in the story. And so what happens is it is addressing people's objections, but without any of the defensiveness. That, my friends, is objection flipping. And that, my friends, is how you can use the massive skepticism in the market as your secret weapon. While everybody else is screwing up and not paying attention to this stuff, you're over here strategically handling objections before they ever fucking come up. Now, one more bonus for those of you who stuck to the end of the video. I'm going to tell you now exactly how to get through the let me think about it objection. So let's say you've done everything to the best of your ability. You still get to the end of the call. You present the price, and they say, sounds great. I need to think about it. Now, normally what happens here is our hearts sink into our stomach, and we say to ourselves, I'm not going to be signing this person up. So there are a couple of ways you can handle this. The way I handle it is I do objection flipping like crazy. It's way ahead of time. And so I don't run into this very often. And when I do run into it, it's sincere in most cases. And so what I'll do is I'll say, hey, I totally understand it's a big decision. By all means, take some time to think about it. But let's do this. Let's say that by this day on this time, whether it's a yes or a no, you're going to have a decision for me. Can we agree to that? And I give them, I try to say 48 hours, 24 hours. I try not to go longer than 72 hours, but sometimes they need it. And that's fine, because I'm really not about railroading people into buying my stuff. I'm about having people want it because they see the value. By the way, objection flipping really builds the value too. So that's one way, is to say, let's pick a day and time by which you commit to coming up with a yes or a no. And I'll be, as I always am, I'll be perfectly candid with people and say, the one thing I can't let go is a maybe. If you give me a maybe, I'm never going to stop following up with you until you say yes or no. And so if it's Friday, let's say that on Monday, we're going to circle back and you're going to have an answer for me, whether it's yes or no. How does that sound? They say, okay, sounds great. You book it, you book the time, that's that. In the meantime, if you have things you can send them to binge, do it. It's just great to sort of ease their questions. Now here's a little bit more of a Jedi ninja supercalifragilistic kind of a technique for getting to the heart of what the real objection is. Because here's the thing, I need to think about it as not the real objection in most cases. What I need to think about it means is, I still have a question that's important to be answered. I may not even be sure of it, but I certainly don't want to voice it, right? That's what I need to think about it really means. What I need to think about it really means is I'm not convinced yet. And so I want you to really treat this with respect and even kid gloves, because in the wrong hands, this can turn into a pushy sales tactic like that. So you have to find your own way to show up in these calls with integrity and with, I guess, honesty and, all the traits that you want people to see in you as a coach. So here's the technique. You say to me, hey, sounds great, but I need to think about it. If I think that you're using that as a deflection, and if my gut tells me it isn't true that you just need to ponder, I'm going to say this to you, and you're going to want to write this down too. Okay, great. No problem, Steve. It's a big decision, and it's very common for people to need to think about it. But I have one question for you. What part is it exactly that you need to think about? As soon as you say that, bloop, the real objection pops out. The real objection just shows up. And sometimes it's going to be, no, I just need to think about it. And in which case, my training, my counsel, my suggestion to you is to say, okay, now let's set a day and time to circle back, but okay. But in a lot of cases, hey, I totally understand. It's a big decision. Lots of people feel like they need to think about it. I am curious, though, what part of it do you need to think about? It's like popping a zit, right? The objection just comes to the surface. So there you are, you merry band of pranksters, you renegades, you kings of New England. You now know objection flipping, and the world will never be the same. Except, here's the rub. You didn't write it down. You listen to it. You like me. You like how I show up, but you're not going to implement it. And weirdly, people just don't implement until they invest. And so if you'd like to talk about joining the Client Creation University, which is where I teach all of this stuff, and I teach it at a deep level, and it is tactical, actionable, and practical. It's all based on do it now, get results. So if you'd like to join the Client Creation University, you can still join for as little as $5 a day. And we cover every ethical, every high integrity organic marketing strategy that I know, and which is pretty much all of them. I say that, and of course somebody will invent one I don't know, but you get the point. It's like you go through the Client Creation University and you will have everything you need to get clients every single month. And then, people ask me, well, if you teach that, why do you have the paid stuff too? The paid ads and all that? It's because I want to do more. The organic stuff does work, and it works up to, a few clients every month. But a few clients every month, when you charge $3,000 to $5,000 per client, is pretty good. I want to grow past that after having done that for many, many years. And that's why I also use Facebook groups and paid ads, just to put that question to rest. However, you can make a great living. I have plenty of clients who routinely do $250,000 a year from their coaching businesses. Because once you understand this stuff, $25,000 a month or whatever that comes out to, $20,000 a month, is just not that big a nut. Once you get your head around it, you realize it's not all that much, right? It's $4,000 or $5,000 programs. And if you can't sell one $5,000 program a week, it's more about you than the tactics you're using. So all I'm saying here is if you want to speed up and just lock in your client acquisition stuff, just reach out to me. And don't act like you don't know where to find me. Just reach out to me and tell me you want to talk about or learn about the Client Creation University. That's it. I'll see you guys in the next one.